So I fear that the policies of successive governments on big projects is to set up a structure which defies scrutiny until so much money has been spent that they argue it's too expensive to cancel or alter. Then the blame game starts, with those who fear for their future careers try to jump ship before they're found out. I'm afraid this applies to ministers and officials as well, who knew what and when. I give two examples, my lords. Crossrail 1, a joint TfL Department of Transport project, was going swimmingly until last summer. It was going to open in the autumn, and now it's it's probably 2 years late. We can debate why this had happened. Let's not keep going to the blame game now, but how did the news of this delay and cost overrun not get to the promoters so very much sooner? We'll know eventually, but it's pretty embarrassing for everybody concerned, I think. My lords, HS2 is 10 times worse, not only because its costs are very much higher than that of Crossrail, but because the evidence of cost overruns, cover-ups, and I say fraud as well, and worse, are rampant even before the permanent construction work has started. I'm not going to speak about the House of Lords Economic Affairs Committee report, published I think last month, which I think is excellent, but our ministers have promised a debate on this before the summer recess. But many people on HS2 believe that the specification was ridiculously high. It started as a vanity project to get to the northern cities faster, but it became a project eventually to create extra capacity on the network, but they didn't change the spec. On the costs, the House of Commons Library briefing on the 20th of June noted that a comprehensive breakdown of costs for the full why of the scheme has not been published since 2013. My lords, that's 6 years ago. This was confirmed by the IPA giving HS2 an amber-red category for 6 years running, on a project estimated to cost over 50 billion in the Department of Transport's figures. Now, the department argues with myself and the cost engineer Michael Bing, who has suggested it's more like 156 billion. But then nobody has ever challenged his estimate. The government just says they don't recognise it, but they haven't come up with any alternative. That's even in front of the Select Committee a few years ago. So I fear that there's a concerted effort by officials and successive ministers to prevent scrutiny of the costs and programme, to refuse to discuss ways of reducing costs, and generally batten down the hatches over a 6-year period for what is, I think, the single most expensive project on the IPA list. And my worry, therefore, is first of all, the project scope. There were many estimates. There is rumours that the estimate that was signed before the Select Committee was wrong and inaccurate. The property requirements for both permanent and temporary works have not been properly estimated. And parts of the engineering, the approaches to Euston, alternative proposals for Wendover, track design, and of course the engineering and cost implications of very high speeds, came up against officials who wouldn't consider any option, in fact, offering to reduce the cost of it. And it seems to me that this is a strong element of putting your head in the sand and hope it'll all go away. We've got contractors who've signed up to the design and construct contracts, but they can't make the figures work, and that's why we're getting delayed at the moment. Sadly, in addition, there are many, many staff changes which are bad. There's a churn of staff, which I think in a project like this is pretty disastrous. Get rid of people who know too much or disagree with the policy, and we'll keep to the original budget over 6 years. The Permanent Secretary, of course, Philip Rutman, got promoted to the Home Office when the original cost estimates were challenged, and David Prout, who was responsible within the Department of Transport for HS2, he retired to run an Oxford College. HS2 has had at least 4 chairmen in the period we're talking about, and the Chief Executive Alison Munro felt able to sign the estimates, knowing, I think, full well that the budget was shot to pieces. She left soon after, as did Beth West and Jim Crawford, who resigned last week. We have two whistleblowers, Andrew Bruce and Doug Thornton, who are both highly skilled professionals on property issues, who were sacked half an hour before they were due to present their findings on property costs to the Department of Transport's client board, because they were sacked because they refused to lie about property cost estimates. And the last thing on this is that Simon Kirby, a former chief executive, was found a job at Rolls-Royce, very conveniently, because he was blamed for awarding 2.7 million of unauthorised redundancy policies to HS2 staff, which I have on good authority was actually used to pay off the whistleblowers. So, my Lord, this is a very, very sad situation, coupled with a culture of secrecy. And New Civil Engineer wrote a piece last week which said that HS2 had signed a total of 280 non-disclosure agreements with external parties between 2012 and March this year, with 40% signed in 2018 alone. The department therefore found it more difficult to avoid internal scrutiny by the IPA. One of the senior advisors, Paul Mansell, was embedded in HS2 for a year and reported in a confidential report, which I think everybody's now got, that the status of the programme was between amber, red and red. I won't go through all his conclusions because they're more or less, they basically say that the project will remain fundamentally flawed unless greater transparency and frankness is provided. Mansell's report was leaked, and the IPA confirmed his findings later. So, my Lords, there's a big problem here. I hope that the the new Department of Transport's report from lessons learnt will, in fact, put some of these things right, but I also believe that other government departments do need to take note of what's gone really wrong on Crossrail and HS2 and come up with some solutions to make the new projects a better place.